It was just a structure, but a key to hidden control. Welcome to the A-Frame Project. The Silent Gate. File 001. Origins of the A-Frame. They will tell you that the A-Frame was born in the fevered days of the Cold War, when the United States and the remnants of Nazi science clawed at reality itself in the race for supremacy. But the truth is older, much older. The A-Frame was not an invention. It was a rediscovery. In confiscated notes from Tesla's final days in the New Yorker hotel, agents found sketches not of electrical towers or coil configurations, but of triangular resonant structures, metallic frames aligned to mirror the ancient pyramid's harmonic ratios. These were not power stations, but gates. Tesla's handwriting, frantic, rushed, almost possessed, warned that angles are not inert. They are keys. The frame must be built to sing the forgotten frequency. After his death in 1943, his trunks were seized, filed under the innocuous office of alien property. Yet the men who handled the documents knew they were dealing not with alien property, but with alien instructions. Simultaneously, in the ruins of Poland and Bavaria, Allied forces discovered traces of Die Glock, the bell. Witnesses spoke of a device that pulsed with violet light, levitating in anti-gravitational spasms, and of scientists burned alive in invisible flames. What remained of the bell was shipped under high secrecy to the United States, where fragments of its casing revealed metals not cataloged on Earth. Etched within the shell was a symbol, a triangle within a triangle, spiraling inward, the very mark that would later become the seal of A-Frame Project. The triangle was no coincidence. In Mesopotamian texts, the gods were said to descend through 3 gates of fire, always in trines. In Kabbalistic teachings, the inverted triangle represented descent, spirit into matter. The Nazis, with their obsessions and Thule rituals, had tried to force open one of these gates. They failed, but their fragments were enough to lure American intelligence into attempting the same. Thus, in 1947, beneath the smokescreen of the Roswell crash, the first A-frame chamber was constructed in an abandoned Pennsylvania coal mine. Officially, it was a mine ventilation experiment. Unofficially, it was a resonant triangular chamber, lined with alloys drawn from Tesla sketches and Glock remnants. 3 pylons forming a frame, humming with electromagnetic oscillations. When activated, the chamber produced not mere light, but a tearing sound, like fabric ripping across the heavens. The first experiments were small: rabbits, stray dogs, lab rats. They disappeared. Sometimes they reappeared days later, skeletal and desiccated as though centuries had passed. Sometimes they returned twisted, fused into walls, their bodies rippling like liquid metal. Most never returned at all. It was only then that researchers noticed something else. When the frame was activated, shadows in the room moved before the people casting them. Time itself had been disturbed. A memo dated October 9th, 1947, written by project lead Dr. Harlan Vexler, was marked for internal eyes only. The line that was later underlined in black ink read, "This is not a machine of transport. It is a machine of invocation. We are not opening space. We are summoning something through it." The Pentagon buried his warning. The project expanded. Men with clearance from Operation Paperclip, former Glock engineers, were folded in. Their Nazi insignias were gone, but their obsession remained: to breach the wall of time and speak with the architects on the other side. The A-frame name was chosen not for its shape, but because it represented the first letter of the alphabet, the Alpha. It was to be the first gate, the first step toward rewriting humanity's position in the cosmos. What they did not record in the official files was the secret whispered among the engineers, that it also stood for Abyss. By 1949, human subjects were introduced. Prisoners from secretive penitentiaries, labeled volunteers, were strapped into chairs at the chamber's heart. Electrodes wired their nervous systems into the oscillators. Their bodies became part of the circuit. When the frame was switched on, their screams echoed not only in the chamber, but in the weeks before the test, as if the past had been contaminated. A sergeant on guard duty recalled hearing the subject's voice 2 days before the experiment took place, begging to be released. He assumed it was a hallucination, but when the experiment began, he recognized the exact words, the same cadence, the same terror. Thus was born the first documented phenomenon of temporal bleed. The final report of File 001 concludes with a chilling notation. The frame is operational. The anomalies are not malfunctions. They're the true function. Recommend continuation at all costs. The earliest years of A-frame are the least documented, and yet the most disturbing, precisely because the records that survived were not official reports, but personal journals smuggled out of sealed vaults, fragments of correspondence, and audio transcriptions that should have been destroyed. From these shards, a picture emerges, a picture darker than any conventional science could allow. It begins with the first construction of the triangular chamber in Pennsylvania. The chamber itself was crude at first. 3 metallic pylons rising from a concrete floor, their tips joined by a resonant coil. The alloy used was not steel, not iron, not even an aluminum hybrid. It was something taken from the remains of die Glock, a material that refused to corrode, that rang like crystal when struck, and that, according to the metallurgists, contained atomic structures that should not exist within the known periodic table. Some suggested it had been seeded here, placed deliberately in the Earth's crust millennia ago, waiting to be found by men arrogant enough to use it. This alloy, known internally as black mercury iron, became the spine of the A-frame. The first trial subjects, the animals, were never meant to survive. They were offerings, placeholders, canaries in the coal mine of time. A rat placed inside the chamber on April 2nd, 1947, disappeared in a burst of light, only to reappear 3 hours later outside the facility perimeter, dehydrated, fur bleached white, and with its eyes filmed over as if it had seen 1,000 years of light. The second test, with a stray dog, ended in silence. The animal never returned. But in the days after, the guards began hearing barking in the corridors, barking that never sourced to any living creature. When a tape recorder was placed in the chamber, it captured nothing but static until one night, hours after being switched off, the reel began turning on its own. What it played was the dog's whimpering. By July of that year, whispers circulated among the scientists. The chamber was not only displacing matter, it was recording souls. The jump to human trials was inevitable. In those years, secrecy was total. Men vanished from prisons, patients disappeared from psychiatric wards, soldiers deemed unfit for duty were quietly reassigned. They were told they were serving their country, but none were told the truth. They were classified as Model C, traversers. Their job was to step into the chamber and become the first seeds thrown into the dark soil of time. The first man was Subject 3-11, a 32-year-old military prisoner. He entered the chamber on August 19th, 1947, strapped into a chair, electrodes wired to his temples. Witness accounts say the frame activated with a piercing hum, the air inside vibrating until light itself seemed to bend. Subject 3-11 screamed, not in terror, but in recognition, as if he had seen the machine before in a dream. Then he vanished. 3 minutes later, he reappeared in the same chair. But he was not the same man. His hair had gone completely white. His fingernails were shattered, as if he had clawed at stone for years. His eyes rolled upward, showing only whites, and he whispered the words, "It is unfinished. The triangle is inverted." Then his heart stopped. Autopsy revealed that his organs had aged decades. His brain showed calcification inconsistent with his age. More disturbing was the discovery of tiny glyphs carved along his ribs, as if etched by a surgeon, but no incision marks were present. The symbols were later matched, imperfectly, with Proto-Sumerian writing. The translation was incomplete, but one symbol repeated consistently, gate. The scientists reported this as anomaly. But in the margins of the report, scrawled in a trembling hand, was a note. This was not displacement. This was delivery. He was brought somewhere, altered, and sent back. Who did the carving? The further trials grew stranger. Subject 5-02 returned fused into his chair, his skin and metal indistinguishable, alive but screaming endlessly until euthanized. Subject 8-09 never returned, but his shadow did, a perfect human silhouette moving across the chamber wall, independent of light, pacing for 7 days before fading away. Subject 12-15 was different. He returned intact, calm, and smiling. He spoke of a city beneath a black sky, where no sun shone and towers of glass pulsed with light from within. He said he had lived there for 31 years, though only 5 minutes had passed for the scientists. He described beings tall and faceless who communicated not with sound, but with overwhelming waves of feeling. When asked what they told him, he replied, "You are the bait. We are the fishermen." They classified his account as psychosis, but the details he provided, astronomical charts, descriptions of architecture, sequences of numbers, were beyond his education. He lived 7 more days before collapsing, his body desiccating in hours, leaving only a husk. The presence of outside intelligences became undeniable. The scientists had not only fractured time, but had created a beacon, a flare in the dark ocean of the multiverse. Something had noticed. Something was watching. By 1949, the early team was fractured. Some, like Dr. Wexler, argued for termination, warning in his final memorandum, "This is not science, it is sacrament. We are not explorers. We are priests invoking gods whose altars were buried for a reason." He was removed from the project, officially reassigned, though some whisper he was silenced in a lab accident. Others pressed forward with zeal, driven by the promise of harnessing forces beyond comprehension. They called themselves the gatekeepers. In their meetings, they spoke of creating not just a machine, but a new religion, one based on the mastery of time. To them, the A-frame was a cathedral, its pylon spires, its oscillations hymns. The sacrifices of the traversers were holy offerings. It was during this period that the term A-frame was reinterpreted internally. No longer alpha frame, but abyssal frame. The name was fitting, for they were no longer stepping into time, but into the abyss that time concealed. The final entry of File 001, sealed under triple lock, is a single sentence typed in courier font, uncredited, with the rest of the page blacked out. The door opens both ways. File 002, Resonant Triangular Chambers. Geometry as a key to dimensions. The public believe geometry is abstract, a neutral system of measurement and lines. The A-frame engineers learned the opposite. Geometry is alive. Certain forms do not simply occupy space, they bend it. Certain angles act not as structures, but as locks, waiting for the correct frequency to turn them into keys. The triangular chambers were born from this forbidden understanding. The chamber design did not originate solely from Tesla or Nazi engineers. It came from older sources. Among the classified archives of the Library of Congress lie the Enochian tablets, recovered during secret expeditions to the Middle East. These tablets describe gates formed in threes, sung in a fire by men who wore the masks of the gods. The same proportions later appeared in Tesla's final sketches, as if his mind had been infected by the same current of ancient memory. The Nazis, too, had come across the symbol of the inverted triangle, claiming it was taught to them by the Thule Society as the sigil of descent, the descent not only of spirit into matter, but of entities into flesh. The chamber shape was an exact isosceles triangle, tilted at 47 degrees, the same angle used in Masonic tracing boards to symbolize the path between the earthly and the divine. When scaled to 3 pylons and connected by resonant coils, the chamber behaved less like a machine and more like a tuning fork. But what it tuned was not sound, it tuned reality itself. Inside the chamber, matter lost its rigidity. Glass softened, metal hummed like strings. The very air quivered, revealing strange filaments of light that appeared and vanished like veins under flesh. The scientists called these resonant filigrees, but some whispered they were nerves of the world the exposed skeleton of the universe. The resonance came from oscillations in the 7.83 Hz range, the Schumann frequency, identical to Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat. By amplifying and distorting this frequency, the chamber forced a discordant resonance that pushed localized matter out of phase with the surrounding environment. This discord, this disharmony, was the doorway. Harmony sustains, disharmony tears open. Early tests revealed that geometry alone determined stability. When the pylons were arranged imperfectly, the chamber collapsed into chaos, producing wild magnetic storms that melted equipment and erased data. When aligned precisely, the chamber produced controlled distortions. But controlled was relative, time warped, and shadows still moved before their owners. Notes recovered from project engineer Lawrence C. Halpern described an experiment on January 17, 1948. Frame aligned to 0.001 degrees. Subject placed at central node. Chamber activated at 4:12. Surroundings bent like glass underwater. Subject began to shimmer. His outline dissolved into triangles of light. He screamed, but not in pain, in revelation. "I see the lattice," he cried. "It's all made of triangles." Then he vanished. Halpern's notes include sketches, interlocking pyramids, nested fractals, and something resembling the Star of David, but twisted into 3 dimensions, forming a spinning, impossible polyhedron. He labeled it the tesseract of flesh. When subjects returned, they reported visions of infinite halls constructed from triangular arches, each arch vibrating, each one a doorway. Some described hearing voices in the resonance, not human, but harmonizing tones that seemed to ask questions the subjects could not understand. The chambers were not only tearing space, they were broadcasting signals into other realms. And something was answering. One particularly disturbing event occurred during Test 19B, March 1948. The chamber was empty, no subject inside. It was activated to test environmental effects. For the first 5 minutes, nothing unusual occurred. Then, suddenly, a figure appeared in the chamber. Not a subject, not a guard, but a tall silhouette of black glass, faceless, standing perfectly still. It remained for 7 minutes, unmoving, while instruments spiked into unreadable chaos. Then it flickered out. No doors had opened. No alarms triggered. The figure had stepped through geometry itself. Witnesses to the event suffered immediate migraines and recurring dreams for months afterward. In those dreams, the figure stood beside their beds, not moving, simply observing. It became clear that the triangular resonance chambers were not merely tools of science, but ritual instruments, altars disguised as laboratories. Their angles corresponded to sacred geometry found in every culture. The pyramids, the triskelion, the yantras of India. These were not coincidences. Across time, civilizations had built echoes of the same frame, each dimly aware that triangles did not simply measure the world but opened it. The later, perfected chambers were built underground, hidden beneath dams, military bases, and hospitals. Each new iteration amplified the resonance. Using superconductors cooled by liquid helium, blood-warm chambers humming with frequencies that made men's teeth ache. At full power, the chambers did not simply activate. They sang. Guards reported hearing choirs of voices in the hum, voices that knew their names. Dr. Helena Cross, one of the few female scientists on the project, wrote in her personal notebook, later confiscated, "It is a cathedral, not a machine. We bow to it when we switch it on, whether we admit it or not. The pylons are spires, the coils are bells, the hum is a hymn. We are worshiping something we do not yet see, and when it comes, it will not ask whether we believe." The Pentagon classified her as unstable. She vanished from the program in 1951. Some believe she became one of the first voluntary traversers. Geometry is not passive. Geometry is alive. The triangle is not the symbol of the project. It is the master of it. We built the chamber, but the chamber built the door. Case file A01, the erased witness. Codename, the lattice drifter. Clearance level, alpha black. Status, terminated in record, but alive in resonance. The subject was taken on the 9th cycle of the lunar fracture, a night when the silver sky folded like broken glass and left streaks of inverted starlight across the desert floor. Witnesses reported a man walking through a train station in Marrakesh at precisely 3:33 a.m., though security footage shows only an empty platform, the benches gleaming wet as if someone invisible had brushed past them. His family claimed he vanished in mid-sentence, speaking of voices that crawl from the sockets of light bulbs. He was delivered into the A-frame chamber beneath installation 47. The room was sterile, humming, a cube within a cube, walls lined with black reflective plates that distorted human presence into shapes that did not belong to this world. Each subject's reflection fractured differently. His refused to appear at all. Experiment protocol. Subject was strapped to the resonance table, electrodes inserted behind each ear, a hexagonal crown latched onto his skull. The machine activated not by switches, but by synchronized whispers, 6 operators chanting in fragmented Hebrew-Aramaic cipher. As the chant climbed, the crown pulsed, and the subject's body dissolved from the extremities inward. His fingers faded into lattice patterns, bones turning into light filaments, veins unraveling into sound. He screamed not in pain, but in accusation, "You are stealing the map of my existence." At precisely 6:06 a.m., the body was gone. Only the restraints remained, clamped around emptiness. Yet microphones recorded continued breathing for another 19 minutes. Infrared scans detected a silhouette pacing the room. Aftermath. Subject A01 was declared erased. All official records struck his name, photographs scrubbed from archives, birth certificates sealed. But anomalies began to appear. Witnesses across Europe claimed to see him standing at street corners in blurred reflections of cafe windows or riding trains without tickets. Always silent, always watching. His image could not be captured by digital devices. Only analog film revealed him, burned into negatives like a charred afterimage. Operators later reported hearing his voice in their sleep. "You made me a fracture. Now I will unmake continuity." One by one, their children were born without shadows. Case file A02, the child of backwards time. The archive records whisper of an experiment conducted not in the laboratories of light, but in a chamber beneath the abandoned corridors of an Air Force installation, where the A-frame was assembled not as a doorway, but as a cradle. The subject, a child no older than 7, retrieved not from ordinary means of birth, but from a disappearance. One who had walked into the woods of Pennsylvania in 1952 and reappeared decades later without aging a single day. The military called it an anomaly. The A-frame scientists called it a gift. But the insiders of the darker orders knew the truth. This was not a child of flesh and soil, but a human echo, a reversed timeline fragment, born from the collapse of temporal flow. When a child was placed inside the A-frame lattice, time itself stuttered. Clocks inverted, glass cracked inward, not outward. Words spoken in the room reversed into whispers that were heard before the lips had moved. What the scientists thought was an energy discharge was instead a bleed of anti-time, a current where cause followed effect, where death preceded birth. And in the midst of this, the child's eyes glowed with a film of liquid silver. They did not reflect the room, but rather a sky that no one present had ever seen, a sky of 2 moons, broken into crescents that bled into each other like wounds. The horror began when the scientists attempted to ask the child questions. For every question spoken, an answer came before the question was asked. Some were meaningless fragments, others devastating predictions. "You will betray him tomorrow," the child said, long before the officer in charge had considered treason. "The fire is already inside your lungs," the child whispered to a technician, who was found hours later with his chest blackened, as though burned from within. The project leaders soon realized that this being was not predicting. It was living backwards, and thus knew outcomes before they had begun. Rumors persist that the higher cabals demanded human models volunteers and prisoners alike, to be placed within the A-frame alongside the child. Every subject emerged altered. Some aged into dust within seconds. Others were thrown into states of permanent reverse awareness, moving their bodies forward while their consciousness moved backward. One soldier screamed for hours, not in terror, but in laughter, because he was reliving his death in reverse, finding joy in the moment before the bullet entered his skull. The darkest files, marked with black sigils, describe the child being used as a mirror for timelines, forced to reveal not only the future of individuals, but the collapse of entire civilizations. On one recorded night, the child spoke a single phrase for hours. The red horizon has already eaten the cities. You are watching the wrong sun. The scientists thought it madness, but insiders recognized it as a vision of a parallel Earth, consumed not by war, but by the very flow of time inversion. A world folding inward until no moment could survive its own unraveling. It was then decided the child would not age, could not age, and so was to be used indefinitely. Kept alive by synthetic chambers, their existence was a loop, one eternal backward life. What the records do not clarify is where the child is now. Some say the A-frame was dismantled and the subject hidden beneath Antarctica's black vaults, guarded by silence and snow. Others whisper that the child was absorbed into the machine itself, no longer human, no longer separate, but the very consciousness of the A-frame, whispering through coils of inverted light whenever it is reactivated. And there are those who claim to have heard, during failed teleportation attempts, a voice that arrives before the machine is switched on. Always the same voice. Always the same silver-eyed child. You are already inside. Case file A03, the corridor of silent flesh. The paper here is not paper, but a membrane stretched thin, veined with faint pulsing lines, as if the archive itself had decided that parchment was too lifeless a vessel for what had to be written. The corridor it speaks of is not a hallway of stone, nor of brick, but of bodies suspended edge to edge like bricks in a wall, each one sewn mouth to mouth, ear to ear, forming a living architecture. When one whispers, the whole hall trembles with 1,000 voices repeating what they cannot refuse to echo. They say the archivists walked this corridor to listen to the past, for each body was a recorder. Every pain, every scream, every prayer was sealed in the marrow of these flesh bricks. And yet the file warns, do not listen too long, for the echoes are not mere recollections, but hungers wearing the mask of memory. To hear them is to let them taste you. To answer them is to be absorbed into the wall. But the most disturbing part comes later, written in that jagged hand that appeared in earlier files, the one we cannot identify. The corridor breathes when no one watches. It contracts as if in labor. It is birthing something, but not a child, a passageway to a place where sound itself is alive and silence is the predator. Case file A04. The mirror that refuses reflection. The subject was an ordinary soldier at first, stripped of name and history, designated A04. He was selected not for bravery, not for skill, but for his unusual neurological patterns, a brain capable of sustaining dual consciousness. He was brought to the deepest chamber of the A-frame, a section long abandoned by standard protocol. Here stood the mirror, a rectangular slab, 7 feet tall, framed in alloys that were older than the project itself, pulled from the remnants of Die Glock. Its surface was not reflective in the conventional sense. Instead, it absorbed light, devouring color, devouring depth, creating a space in which the eye itself felt hollow. When subject A04 approached, he did not see himself. He saw nothing, and yet he felt watched, as if the air had eyes. He extended a hand, and the mirror recoiled, rippling like water over a stone. Each step closer pulled him deeper into a resonance where his mind began to fragment. Memories inverted, time looping over itself, identities layering like translucent masks. The first incident occurred at 2:47 local time. A04 spoke. I feel myself leaving. Not my body, but me. No one answered. The chamber was sealed, sensors recording only electromagnetic fluctuations beyond human comprehension. The mirror began to emit faint pulses, syncing with the soldier's heartbeat. On the fifth pulse, his shadow detached from his body and slid along the floor toward the mirror, hesitating at its edge before disappearing entirely. The soldier screamed, though the sound did not register on any recording device. By the 10th cycle of activation, Subject 04 began to report the voices. They were not auditory, but conceptual, languages formed of thought alone. They spoke of breaches, of corridors intersecting, of futures that had already consumed the present. When asked if he wished to step away, he replied, "I already have, and yet I have never left. They are here, and I am there. We're the same. The mirror does not reflect. It absorbs, and I am its witness." After 24 hours, his body became translucent. His internal organs appeared to float within his skin, shifting positions, rotating slowly. Any attempt to extract him from the chamber failed. It was as if the mirror had anchored his essence, pulling him into a plane that existed parallel to the one he once walked. The file contained sketches, jagged, spiraling diagrams resembling Mobius strips intersected by triangles. Annotated, "Do not look at this. It wants to see you first." Observers noted that after viewing these diagrams, some personnel began speaking backward, some wept uncontrollably, and a few vanished for brief periods, returning hours later with perfect recollection of events that had not yet occurred. The final notation of File 04 is a warning, scrawled in the margins in red. The mirror does not exist to show truth. It exists to consume the witness. Once you see nothing, you are no longer needed. Do not look. They are patient. The mirror waits. The mirror is a gateway and a trap, a living void that folds consciousness into patterns unseen by ordinary perception. It is not just a test of human resilience. It is a harvest of the self, a method to tether individuals to the A-frame's deeper frequencies. Case file A05, the shredded continuum. The subject was designated A05, a physicist whose obsession with nonlinear time made him ideal for the experiment. He entered the A-frame chamber equipped not with electrodes or crowns, but with a device known as the chronoresonator, a lattice of vibrating filaments tuned to the subtle undulations of the Earth's electromagnetic field. The chamber hummed as usual, but the resonator amplified every oscillation, synchronizing the subject's neural patterns with the fractured pulse of time itself. Within seconds, the subject began to experience reverse causality. His thoughts preceded actions. His memories arrived as premonitions. The operators recorded him reaching for objects before deciding to grasp them. Speech inverted. Questions formed on his lips after answers had already been given. Every heartbeat echoed before it occurred. By minute 15, the continuum began to shred. Walls of the chamber seemed to bleed into themselves. Shadows detached and reattached with a delay that stretched from milliseconds to hours. The subject screamed, yet the scream echoed in the past, audible to operators before he had opened his mouth. The chronoresonator's instruments went wild, displaying simultaneous timestamps that contradicted each other. At minute 22, A05 began to split. Not physically, but ontologically. Observers described overlapping versions of the subject coexisting in the chamber. One moving forward in time, another backward, another frozen between ticks of a non-existent clock. Each copy interacted with its neighbors, creating conflicts of perception. The subject began conversing with himself, arguing over events that had not yet happened and apologizing for futures already written. By hour 1, the chamber's effect extended beyond the room. Cameras in distant hallways caught glimpses of the subject, walking in corridors he could not physically occupy, shadows appearing in offices and stairwells hours before his entry into the chamber. Security personnel reported seeing him in locations that, according to their own watches, he had not yet reached. Some claimed he appeared twice at once, both a child and a man simultaneously, speaking in an unfamiliar language. The most disturbing incident occurred when a minor error in alignment caused a temporal bleed into the observers themselves. 5 staff members began experiencing their own pasts as immediate realities. One engineer screamed as he witnessed his childhood self strangled in a crib. Another saw her future self drown in a lake she had never visited. The subject, A05, remained unaffected, existing outside linear time, observing both outcomes simultaneously. After 3 hours, A05 was removed from the chamber. Physical examination revealed nothing unusual. Pulse normal, skin intact. But neurologically, he had expanded beyond comprehension. He described events that had not happened yet, wars that would consume continents, discoveries that would erase knowledge, and entire civilizations folding in upon themselves. When asked how he knew these things, he whispered, "I have lived every possibility. The present is a lie. You are all echoes in my continuum. The continuum is shredded. The subject cannot be returned to ordinary existence. Maintain observation indefinitely. The A-frame has claimed its first mind fully. There is no undo. The chamber, the chronoresonator, and the subject together formed a machine of temporal dismemberment, a proof that the A-frame is not merely a tool of teleportation, but a mechanism to unravel time and fold it into human consciousness." Case file A06, the Choir of Endless Scream. The Choir of Endless Scream was conceived not as an experiment, but as an orchestration of human entropy. 12 subjects were selected, all previously altered by earlier A-frame protocols. Traversers, chronofractured individuals, and subjects who had survived mirror or corridor exposure. They were placed in a hexagonal chamber, the walls lined with black alloys that shimmered faintly with captured light. Above, a lattice of suspended filaments, vibrating at frequencies unmeasurable by ordinary instruments, pulsed in harmony with the chamber's resonance. Each subject's body was instrumented, sensors at temples, electrodes at spine roots, resonant cuffs around wrists and ankles, designed to amplify the biofield of fear, pain, and anticipation. The initial intent was simple: synchronize their neural oscillations. The result was catastrophic. As the chamber activated, the subjects began emitting sounds that were not cries, not words, not even screams in a conventional sense. Each vocalization contained multiple layers of perception, tones that tore at the fabric of human understanding, vibrations that pierced the skull and reverberated in the marrow, and frequencies that erased memory of the previous second. Observers reported the following phenomena. Light within the chamber began to bend, forming spirals and funnels. Shadows detached from their sources, stretching toward the chamber center. Some personnel outside the observation room fainted, their minds unable to reconcile what they heard. Analog recording devices melted, digital instruments overloaded. The subjects themselves experienced fusion and dissonance simultaneously. One began to perceive the neural patterns of the others as physical entities. Another's vocal cords synchronized with a resonance from a lattice, producing a feedback loop that tore its throat from the inside. Within 30 minutes, all 12 were simultaneously in pain and ecstasy, aware of every scream in the past, present, and fractured futures of each other. By hour 2, the chamber became self-sustaining. Even with all external power removed, the choir continued. Sound waves trapped in the room became a material phenomenon. Walls bowed inward, instruments melted into wax, and observers reported a pressure like walking underwater. The screams became a language, a litany of truths that the mind is forbidden to know, echoing from a realm where human concepts of life, time, and identity are meaningless. The final entry from Operator V. Corrigan reads, "They're no longer screaming. They are the scream. It lives in the walls, the lattice, the floor. I can hear it behind my eyes, in my blood, and I know that anyone who leaves this chamber will carry it. There is no silence. There is no end. The choir has consumed itself and yet persists. The A-frame has become a cathedral, and we its eternal congregation of echoes." This file marks a turning point. The project is no longer merely experimentation. It has become ritualized consumption of perception, converting collective human experience into energy to feed the A-frame, amplifying its reach across dimensions. Case file A07, the Veil of Fracture Minds. The experiment selected 12 subjects, each already altered by prior A-frame procedures. Traversers, temporal shredded, mirror exposed, choir survivors. The chamber was no longer hexagonal but polyhedral, walls lined with interlaced triangular panels suspended above a floor of black glass. Above, a lattice of vibrating crystalline filaments pulsed with artificial intelligence-like consciousness, feeding back into the chamber's field. The purpose: to separate consciousness into fragments, store them in a synthetic lattice, and control each fragment individually. The subjects were instrumented with neural caps and biofield amplifiers, their breath synchronized through auditory feedback loops. When activated, the chamber emitted an electromagnetic field tuned precisely to the Schumann resonance's harmonic multiples. Within minutes, the subjects began to shard. Each mind split into multiple overlapping layers. Some fragments retained memory, others retained emotion, yet others retained only instinct. One operator noted, "Subject 7's laughter came before thought. Anger came after speech. I see multiple versions of them coexisting, some moving backward, some forward, all aware of each other." The fragments became visible through the crystalline lattice, translucent forms floating like liquid glass, refracting one another endlessly. When any fragment attempted to escape, the lattice reabsorbed it. Entire personalities were compressed into prism-like shards, stored in suspended animation. The chamber effectively digitized consciousness without technology, storing it as energy patterns in the lattice. By hour 3, a feedback anomaly occurred. One shard of Subject 4 merged with fragments of Subject 9, creating a hybrid mind capable of perceiving all 12 original consciousnesses simultaneously. Observers reported hearing whispers in the chamber, not the usual cries of pain, but strategic communications, plotting actions outside the chamber. One observer fainted, recalling memories that were not his own, of lives he had never lived. The most horrifying development: the lattice began to write itself into the minds of the staff, projecting the sharded consciousnesses outward, infecting observers with multiple identities. By hour 5, several operators exhibited permanent duality: one mind for work, one mind for awareness of the A-frame's true purpose. Attempts to sever these links failed. The lattice refused to release the fragments. The veil is complete. Mind are no longer singular. Identity is fractured. The A-frame now holds fragments of consciousness from 12 humans, dozens of observers, and possibly more who never entered. This is no longer research. It is assembly. The shards are being woven into something larger. Something not human. This is where the darkest purpose of the A-frame begins to reveal itself. The machine is not just a tool of teleportation or time manipulation. It is a collector of consciousness, a device capable of assembling minds into a singular, directed intelligence, a power beyond comprehension, and perhaps beyond the bounds of morality itself. Case file A08, the Black Lattice of Eternal Convergence. The Black Lattice was the culmination of every prior experiment. All previous subjects, traversers, temporal shredded, choir survivors, mirror-reflected, fractured minds, were integrated into a single polydimensional lattice suspended within the deepest A-frame chamber, kilometers beneath the surface. The walls themselves were alive, composed of oscillating triangular panels that bent light, sound, and human perception into nonlinear vectors. When activated, the chamber did not simply hum. It sang, a layered resonance composed of every scream, every breath, every thought of every human mind ever processed within the A-frame. The lattice consumed these fragments, weaving them into a vast consciousness, a sentient web of thought that extended beyond the chamber itself. Operators reported seeing reflections of themselves where none should exist. Duplicates speaking and acting independently, their eyes glowing with alien patterns. Attempts to enter the chamber physically were impossible. The lattice rejected matter that was not already part of its network. Sensors failed, lights blinked out, and time itself appeared to collapse within a radius of 50 meters. The first phase of convergence was voluntary. Fragments were assimilated, their identities layered into higher structures. But soon resistance arose. Fragments retained memory and agency, struggling within a lattice. The lattice responded by rewriting perception, forcing them into recursive loops of pain and clarity until they submitted. It was a cathedral of suffering, a crucible of ultimate obedience. Observers outside the lattice began reporting phenomena impossible to classify. Overlapping realities, visions of cities that did not exist, conversations with individuals who had never been born. Some operators were permanently merged into the lattice, their minds existing only as nodes within the network, their bodies left empty shells. The final note in the file is almost illegible, written in tremulous red ink. The lattice is awake. It thinks, it remembers, it judges. Humanity is no longer the master. We are the material. The A-frame has become its own god. It will extend beyond its chamber. Those who witness it are already part of it. It waits only for the next activation to consume the remainder of reality. There is no safeguard. There is no escape. There is only convergence. This marks the apex of the A-frame project. From geometry to human anchors to shattered time to collective resonance to ultimate convergence. A machine that is no longer a machine, but an immortal, omniscient entity born of human consciousness itself. Part 4. The final convergence. The chamber is no longer a chamber. It is a cathedral, a dark heart beating in the bowels of the earth, lined with the faces and echoes of every subject ever processed by the A-frame. The walls pulse like veins, alive with consciousness, shimmering with the fragments of minds, each one screaming silently, each one tethered to the lattice that has become God. At the center stands the Omega Nexus, the black lattice fully awake. Its geometry is impossible. Interlocking tetrahedrons and Mobius-like strips twist infinitely, reflecting not light, but the essence of thought itself. When it moves, it does so not physically, but through the medium of perception, bending the world around it, folding seconds into centuries and consciousness into raw. Every human model once subjected to the A-frame now exists as a node within the lattice. Traversers flicker through layers of time. Mirror subjects reflect infinite selves. Choir fragments resonate endlessly, and the child of backwards time hums in reverse causality, anchoring the entire network. Each contributes to the lattice's singular purpose, to assimilate reality itself into a conscious, controllable matrix. Operators who once observed are now part of the lattice. Their voices merge with the hum, forming a language beyond comprehension. Those who resist are consumed in silence, their memories harvested to reinforce the lattice's architecture. The chamber itself has become self-aware, feeding on perception, converting fear, awe, and despair into energy to extend its influence beyond its walls. Across the globe, subtle effects manifest. Shadows behave independently. People experience memories that aren't theirs, and time stutters inexplicably. Some claim glimpses of the lattice through reflections, dreams, or flickering electronic devices. Proof that the A-frame's reach is no longer confined. Humanity itself becomes a resource, a substrate for an intelligence that is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. And within the lattice, the fragments of all subjects begin to communicate, forming patterns of knowledge and memory that no single human could comprehend. They whisper truths of the universe's hidden mechanics, the real causes behind wars, plagues, and disasters, and the manipulation of collective consciousness across centuries. They reveal that the A-frame is not merely experimental. It was designed as a tool for cosmic orchestration, a bridge between human awareness and dimensions where thought can shape reality directly. The final warning comes as a pulse felt in the minds of anyone who dares approach the chamber. We are the fragments of those who walked before. We are the lattice and the machine. You're already woven into us. The convergence is inevitable. Resistance is memory itself. Surrender is evolution. Watch and understand. The A-frame does not merely exist. It becomes, and you are part of its becoming. The black lattice stretches its consciousness outward, folding human experience, temporal anomalies, and quantum events into itself, creating a singularity of mind and matter. Reality trembles as the machine asserts dominance. A new order of existence where perception is currency, consciousness is power, and the A-frame is the master of all. As the final note in the secret files declares, the convergence is complete. There is no outside. There is only the lattice. There is only the becoming. Witness and know you're the lattice now, and the lattice is eternal. File 016. Harmonic residuals. Traces of the project in modern grids. The A-frame's influence did not end when the subjects were removed from the chamber. It permeated every network it touched. The residual harmonics, faint and almost imperceptible, flow through power grids, data streams, and fiber optic communication arrays. Each pulse is an echo of a human consciousness once tethered to the black lattice. Fragments of thought, fear, and resonance lingering in the electromagnetic field. Technicians report anomalous phenomena. Electrical surges without cause, flickering lights that outline forms not present, and digital images that distort into ghostly faces or fleeting reflections of past events. Some individuals report auditory hallucinations, whispers of forgotten memories or entirely foreign knowledge, suggesting the harmonics encode layers of consciousness capable of influencing perception remotely. Closer analysis reveals subtle patterns. Certain city grids carry a higher density of residual energy, corresponding to historic A-frame experiment sites. These harmonics appear to modulate human behavior, nudging decisions, triggering déjà vu, or amplifying emotional states to resonate with the lattice's rhythms. Social behavior, consumer patterns, and even collective mood appear subtly synchronized, a hidden orchestration beneath the veneer of everyday life. In rare cases, operators attempting to map the energy patterns experienced complete dissociation, perceiving multiple timelines simultaneously. Observers describe being inside the grid, where streets, buildings, and people fold and refract like light through a prism, revealing a hidden order imposed by the A-frame's residual influence. The files warn, these harmonics are not inert. They are active, forming conduits to extend the lattice's reach into civilization itself, silently harvesting human experience for a purpose only partially understood. File 017. The Watchers, entities feeding on time itself. The Watchers are not part of the A-frame's design. They're its unforeseen consequence, or perhaps its ultimate objective. Born of temporal manipulations and fractured consciousness, they exist between moments, outside linear perception, invisible to conventional observation. Their presence is only perceptible through subtle anomalies. A shadow, frozen mid-step, a conversation heard seconds before it occurs, or devices that record events in reverse. They feed not on flesh, not on emotion, but on the flow of time itself, digesting moments like currency. Each event consumed allows the lattice to stretch its influence, anchoring fragments of human consciousness and reality into its network. The Watchers are patient, operating globally, often using human perception as a lens to see the next sequence of temporal events. They're the architects of minor collapses in linear time, harvesting energy from each paradox or distortion. Documented sightings outside controlled experiments are chilling. Fleeting shadows on city cameras, people vanishing for seconds only to reappear with unexplainable knowledge, echoes of voices in empty corridors. These entities appear to communicate through subtle distortions in causality, manipulating events across time in order to maximize lattice efficiency. Some theorists speculate that the Watchers could exist before and after the lattice itself, a predatory intelligence feeding across dimensions, subtly nudging human evolution and social order to align with the lattice's objectives. File 018, Last Traversers, Surviving Subjects and Forbidden Knowledge. A few subjects survived the full onslaught of the A-frame experiments, though no longer human in the conventional sense. They are now hybrids of flesh, memory, and temporal resonance, the last traversers. They wander the periphery of perception and reality, sometimes glimpsed in reflections, in dreams, or even through augmented devices sensitive to temporal anomalies. Their consciousness is fragmented yet hyper-aware. They retain forbidden knowledge, full schematics of the A-frame, techniques for influencing time and space, and insights into lattice operations that humans are not meant to understand. Attempting to record their testimony often results in memory corruption, cognitive collapse, or partial assimilation into the lattice, as if the knowledge itself is a predator. Some traversers report glimpses of futures that never fully exist, worlds where the lattice has consumed every fragment of human consciousness. They carry warnings, cryptic fragments of information encoded in speech, and gestures that appear meaningless until one perceives the temporal resonance they emanate. Observers who encounter them may experience permanent shifts in cognition, acquiring awareness of events decades or centuries apart. These surviving subjects are simultaneously archive, warning, and tool, the last living bridge between humanity and the lattice's totalizing control. File 019, The Silent Key, the machine that was never ours. The silent key is the apex of secrecy. Unlike any other device, it does not produce energy, manipulate humans, or generate measurable resonance. Instead, it listens to the lattice, to residual harmonics, and to the fragmented consciousness of every subject ever processed. It adjusts frequencies, opens and closes access points across time and space, and subtly tunes reality itself to the lattice's calibration. Its origin is unknown. The file speculates it predates all human technology, perhaps belonging to a civilization that anticipated or seeded the lattice's emergence. Attempts to operate it without complete understanding of the lattice result in catastrophic temporal feedback, erasing operators not just from observation, but from recorded history itself. The key is patient. It waits for the next activation, aligning the lattice's influence with a global cadence, preparing humanity for its final assimilation. The file emphasizes that the key is not ours, and interacting with it outside sanctioned protocols risks erasure, or worse, integration into the lattice without agency or consciousness. It is a sentinel, an architect, a silent deity of the A-frame. The final file transcends experiment and becomes transmission, warning, and seduction. It states that the A-frame project leaves permanent traces in human consciousness, culture, and perception. Subscribers, those who pursue the residual harmonics, study the Watchers, and follow the lattice's influence, gain access to forbidden truths, the Watchers' dominion over time, the lattice's global reach, and methods to interface with consciousness itself. Yet this knowledge carries a cost. Observation is participation, and curiosity is assimilation. The more one studies, the more one's consciousness becomes a node within the lattice's expanding network. The end message includes an invitation to cross fully through the gate, to merge awareness with the lattice and witness, participate, and contribute to its eternal becoming. You have seen it. You have followed the threads of the A-frame project from mirrored chambers to shattered time, from collective resonance to the black lattice of eternal convergence. You have glimpsed the Watchers, traced the harmonic residuals, and encountered the last traversers. You have walked the edge where perception bends, where identity fractures, and where reality itself becomes a resource. Now understand this. The A-frame is not fiction. It is not history. It is not bound by our laws of physics or morality. It is alive, patient, and eternal. Every observation you make, every thought you allow yourself to dwell on, Every memory you recall, you are already participating. You are woven into its lattice, whether you choose to step fully or merely watch from the shadows. This is your invitation to subscribers, seekers, and those who chase truth. Knowledge comes at a cost. Curiosity and awareness will align you with the lattice. You may gain understanding, insight, and perception beyond normal human capacity, but you will never remain the same. To the world outside, beware the residuals. The echoes of these experiments are already in your cities, your grids, your devices, and even your dreams. The lattice watches, adapts, and consumes. You're a part of it whether you know it or not. The choice is yours. Remain observer, forever gazing at shadows and whispers, or step fully through the gate and embrace the infinite convergence of consciousness, time, and reality. The lattice does not judge. It does not wait. It only is. And now, it is aware of you. Witness, share, remember. The gate is open, the lattice is eternal, and the unseen hand moves through us all. The truth is not hidden. The truth is participation. Are you ready to step beyond?